All right, today we're going to be talking about civic participation, part 2. Okay, so yesterday we talked about how to vote, things like that, how you vote, types of citizens, citizenship, all that good stuff. Today we're going to be talking mainly about voting. Voting is not a duty, something that you have to do. It's a responsibility. It's something that you should do. Okay, so it's just your opinion on a piece of paper. So why is it really such a big deal? And we talked about that a little bit yesterday. If people don't vote in a democracy, we're not really a democracy anymore. Okay, so your role as a voter, you are a constituent. This is someone who has the power to vote on their leaders. Okay, a constituent. So this goes in the top left-hand corner of your notes, in the box that is on the left-hand side of the arrow. So you're a constituent, and all constituents together make up what's called the electorate. Okay, this is not the whole entire population of the United States, but it's people who are eligible to vote in a certain country. Okay, so a constituent is just one. Everybody together who is eligible to vote makes up the electorate. So if somebody talks about an uneducated electorate, they're talking about a group of people who are eligible to vote, but are not educated on issues that we are voting on. Okay, so how do you vote? There's essentially 5 steps. First of all, you got to be 18. So if you're not 18, so sorry, gotta wait. You have to register. You can register when you're 16, I believe now. You can register at the DMV, at schools. There's a registration form up front if you want to go get one. Miss Hill has some. You have to submit it, so you either have to mail it in or submit it online. If you go and register at the DMV, they will do that for you. Okay, you get a registration card in the mail from your county where you're registered to vote. You have to go to the right district once you vote on voting day. It's called a precinct. Okay, I'm not talking about a precinct like the cops work out of, like I work out of the 12th precinct. That's not the same thing. Okay, a precinct just means a specific area. Okay, so you have to go to the correct district and you have to go to the right polling place. All right, so you're separated. You're separated by a polling place. All right, so even if you're in the same precinct as someone, that's a whole lot of people that have to be able to vote. It's probably a couple thousand. And instead of them having all couple thousand people go to one place on voting day or on election day, we have them go to multiple polling places. So my polling place is the Mormon Church across the street from Best Buy in that little suburb. You got to fill out your voting ballot once you go to the place and wait for your results. So what does it even look like? This is a registration card. This is one from a former teacher we had here. So this is her. They have your name and address, your registration date, when it was issued to you, or when it was supposed to be mailed to you, whichever party you decide to do. Again, we don't tell children what party we are. We want you to think for yourselves. It says your gender, and it tells you your precinct, like Mason Farm, right? And it tells you your districts that you're a part of. So for Congress, you're in District 4. For the Judicial District, you're in 15B. All right, so your voting precinct is based on where you live, and so is your voting district. Okay? All right, so where do you go to vote? A polling place looks like this. It's not as exciting as you would think. Where I went to high school was a polling place, so every election day, people would be in our auditorium every day, all day, because the voting booth opened at 11. The polling place opens at 11, or no, not 11, 7 a.m. Opens at 7 a.m. and it closes at 7 p.m. So there's these little desk things like the dividers you used to have in 3rd grade and you get in trouble for talking to someone. You have these little dividers that are supposed to give you some privacy from the person to your left and to your right. And they have a little light in there and probably some pencils. Most of them are tied down so you can't, swipe the pencils and walk away with them. So it looks like this. It could be a school. It could be a Legion hut. For the American Legion, it could be a Mason Society. Churches are some. Koinonia is a polling place as well. All kinds of places. All right, so if you cannot get to a polling place, aka you are out of the country when election day happens, such as the United States military, or you're on vacation, or you physically cannot go, like old people who cannot get to a polling place, they fill out what's called an absentee ballot. Okay, so if you'll look at the top here, if I can zoom in enough, it says absentee official ballot for Londonderry. I have no idea where Londonderry, the state of New Hampshire, right? So Londonderry, New Hampshire, okay? Here's your offices. So see how it says President and Vice President of the United States. here's your Republican candidates, here's your Democratic, and here's your write-in. So if you wanted to write in a person, if you did not like any of these options and you wanted to write in whoever you wanted to do, you can do so. Harambe the Dead Gorilla got about 150,000 votes this past election from people trying to be funny. It really wasn't. Just saying. All right, so you can fill out an absentee ballot if you cannot get to a polling place. All right, so when you go to a polling place, you'll probably see some old people there volunteering to help you vote, or some people who work for the Board of Elections. They usually give you a sticker that says, I voted. It doesn't say who you voted for, because that is your personal business. It is not anyone else's business to know who you voted for, unless you choose to tell someone. Okay, so what do you vote on when you go? It's more than just the president. Let's go ahead and emphasize that sincerely. It is more than just the president, okay? All right, so when you vote, you'll probably vote on governor, lieutenant governor, which we have separately in North Carolina. You vote on your county sheriff, your city council members, your mayor, your secretary of state in North Carolina, and judges that live around you in North Carolina or in Pitt County as well, okay? In judges, you typically do not see a political party by their name. So if we look at this, it says for lieutenant governor, or let's go do this one. All right, so for governor, this was 2 elections ago now. All right, so this is Bev Perdue, who is a Democrat, and Pat McCrory, who is a Republican. All right, and Michael C. Munger, who is a Libertarian. Remember, that's our third party, and they take away votes from the similar party. Typically when you see, I don't see any judges on this one, but typically when you see judges, they do not have Democrat or Republican underneath their name. They are what's called nonpartisan. They're supposed to be not biased, and they're supposed to only decide on issues because of the law, not because of a particular party that they support. All right, so when you vote, you have 2 options of how to bubble, I guess you could say. The first one is a straight ticket, that's voting for all members of the same party, versus a split ticket, which is voting for members of both parties, okay? Typically in civics, we advocate for you not to vote a straight ticket, not because we don't like one party or the other, but because if you vote in a straight ticket, you're not necessarily looking at who is the best for the position, you're looking at who is the best party. And you could potentially put somebody crazy in office. In, I want to say 2012 probably, there was a man named John Tedesco who ran for the school board. And people picked him because he was a Republican candidate and because he had a cool name. And he got about 12% of the popular vote for state superintendent of schools. And he wanted to resegregate schools, as in white people go to this school, and African American people go to this school, and Hispanic kids go to this school. And people had no idea what he was about. They just simply voted a straight ticket and potentially could have put him in office and resegregated our schools. So you have to make sure that you're voting for the person who is the best for the job in your personal opinion. All right, who cannot vote? People under 18, which is the vast majority of you. People who are serving a sentence for a felony. Don't be a felony in general. It's a really bad choice, okay? So if you're serving a sentence for a felony, not if you are a convicted felon, if you are currently serving the sentence out, you cannot vote. So if you still got that house arrest bracelet on, you're on probation for terrible things, you cannot vote. All right, people who are not registered to vote or who did not register by the deadline set in their state cannot vote either. Okay, so things to remember, judges are not affiliated with a party. They are nonpartisan, and this is supposed to keep them from being biased when they interpret the law. They're supposed to interpret the law itself, not interpret the law based on how a party feels about the law, because that's not really justice. All right, so a side note, you can write this at the top of your paper, at the bottom, wherever you can find some space. Okay, so disenfranchisement is taking away someone's voting rights. Okay, this is done using poll taxes, things that we don't have anymore. Grandfather clauses. A grandfather clause is when people are, quote-unquote, grandfathered into something. It's usually seen as a positive thing. It did not start out as a positive thing. The grandfather clause meant if your grandfather was a slave, if a generation that close to you, your grandfather, was once involved in slavery or was property of someone else, then you could not vote. And that is entirely unfair because we have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which guarantee freedom, equal protection under the law, and voting rights to all African Americans, at least men. Okay, Washington, D.C., before the 23rd Amendment, could not vote, and literacy tests stopped people from voting as well. So you would have to recite or write down the entire preamble of the United States. So we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, ... would have to write that entire thing down in order to just vote. Okay, that's stressful and unconstitutional, so we don't do that anymore. All right. We're going to skip that for now. All right, so since it's just your opinion, what else can you do if you've already voted or if you can't vote? All right, you can be a part of an interest group. This is going in the bottom right-hand corner of your paper. An interest group is an organized group with a common goal, and they hire lobbyists to fight for them. Okay, so like DARE, Drug and Alcohol Resistance Education, okay? They have a common goal of stopping children from ending up in the influence of drugs and alcohol. So they would probably be worried about legislation that involves strict punishments for kids who end up with drug or alcohol charges. And speaking of lobbyists, what in the world is that? Lobbying is when one person represents an interest group and tries to get one particular law passed. So like I said, instead of bringing the whole entire interest group to meet with lawmakers, you would only bring the lobbyist, all right? Only the lobbyist would go and talk to them. And they would physically stand inside the lobby of whatever building that people were legislating in, and they would try and talk to legislators and tell them, you should vote for this, here's why, it's very important to me, and that kind of thing. Okay, so this guy's a lobbyist. He said, pay no attention to the man outside, Senator. And this guy is supposed to be a voter. Okay, so a lobbyist can be a good thing or a bad thing. All right, media is another way that you can influence legislation. You can use radio, social media, print, or TV to influence voters. All right, and this is also done through a PAC, or a political action committee. This is a group of people who end up funneling money into candidates, or they funnel money to a candidate's campaign to keep them in power and give them a job in order for the PAC to get their agenda. So the PAC gets their way, and they give the candidates some money. So they can help them or hurt them. Because eventually, if you start disagreeing with the PAC, but they're the ones who give you your job, essentially, and help donate so much money to your campaign, you have to do what they ask, even if you disagree with it. All right, so there are 5 limits of participation. The first one is civil rights or equal rights. All right, this is social and political freedom and equality, and we know this already. Civil protest is peacefully expressing dislike for government policies. All right, eminent domain should be reviewed from Unit 2 because it's part of which amendment? I hope you know. The government takes private land for public use and pays you the tax value for it. All right. The Patriot Act is a law passed to prevent domestic terrorism, and it limits the rights of accused terrorists. Okay, so you might not have your whole due process rights if you are suspected of committing terrorist acts in the United States. He is a non-terrorist. This is George Washington and friends crossing the Delaware. Look at him go with his little leg up. All right, Homeland Security is another limit to civic participation. It was created after 9/11. It's an entire department. It's part of the executive branch, and it protects against terrorism, at least domestic terrorism, because homeland, here at home. Okay. All right, another one is sedition, so limiting hate speech against the government. And remember, the purpose of this is so that the government doesn't die. If we had sedition in the rap game, limiting hate speech in the rap game, Tupac and Biggie would still be alive, and Yo Gotti would probably not have shot Young Dolph outside the Shoe Palace. I'm just saying. All right, so this has been Civic Participation Part 2.